You don't make safe work. If you're going to make safe work, I think the audience is going to be bored. There's always an element of risk and there's always an element of edge. If it's edgy for a performer, it's edgy for an audience, but then that's also exciting.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell.
My name is Lynne Page and I am a choreographer. I think dance was so integral to who I was as a kid because it was a family. There's so many only children that go into theatre or dance or because it's family. I moved to London quite early when I was 16 and I went to Sadler's Wells and I saw Dance Theater of Harlem, which was the most extraordinary thing, seeing them do the Firebird. And I saw Mark Morris Dance Company and Twyla Tharp. I saw the Twyla Tharp Sinatra Suite. There was just a combination of those three performances that were so transcendent that I didn't really think I could ever return to not trying to make work like that. Whether I've achieved it or not, it was a pivotal point for me. But it was those three particular dance companies. I suppose it was the passion of Dance Theater of Harlem and the inventiveness and the humour of Mark Morris, the audacity to do comedy to Bach. Just that together was incredible. I don't know if this is weird, but I used to remember having this conversation with Peter Darling because I was going, you see dance in your head, right? And he's like, yeah, of course I do. But apparently not everybody does. And so that's not me being a complete anchor of a person saying, oh my God, I see dance in my head. But literally, I suppose from the age of 6 or 7, I used to listen to, I think it was Gustav Holst's The Planets or whatever it was, and I'd put this record on and I could see the whole ballet in my head. That's always been the case. Not to every bit of music, but if I want to choreograph something, I'd just close my eyes and listen to the music and I'd see it in my head, really. Oh, you know, I don't want to say it's a gift because I feel pretentious if I say it's a gift. But there was an honest conversation with Peter Darling where he was like, yeah, me too. And, you know, we were like, oh, okay, well, guess that's how it works, you know. So, and then in a way you're manufacturing that you're pretending that she's going into, so she doesn't know yet. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, that's clear.
All right, great. Moving through. The direction made me confident. You know, the practice of hearing your own voice, because you hear your own voice in a room when you're becoming a choreographer, but no, I'm not confident in lots of areas. Put me in a dinner party and people start talking about politics, I'll just go mute because I feel so out of my depth. But, you know, in certain areas, there's a confidence because there's been a muscularity that's been built up over years and years of making work, I suppose. And I also know that it's important to be clear. If you've got a body of people, you can't be kind of wishy-washy or muddy in what you're trying to communicate in your head. You want to kind of at least give them a chance so that you can transfer these images that are going on in your head or these emotions that you're feeling onto a group of people. And I think there's a language where that needs to be clear. I mean, I obviously work in lots of different genres and I do work in musicals, and one of the rules of a musical is that, you know, when you've run out of words, the music has to take over because the emotion is too much. And usually in musical theatre, some of the best songs and some of the best moments happen because that's how to portray emotion. Now, that's not to say you can't do it in words and poetry, of course you can, but, you know, yeah. I'm a dance maker and it's a blessing and it's a curse because after a while, I kind of need to make work by any way, shape or form. I'd probably get itchy feet if I haven't created something for a while. And so maybe from a young age, it's just a vice of letting out things that I probably, like a lot of artists, you keep a lot of stuff in, you don't communicate it, you communicate it through your work. I've got a friend that says to me that I'm always grasping at things, or a lot of the time I make work that's quite angry. Or quite visceral. Maybe I try and be polite and caring in normal life, but actually the rage comes out. I made a piece with the Royal Ballet directly after COVID. I don't know how it quite happened because, you know, I felt like they'd let the sort of heathens in the building, but I managed to break my way into the Royal Opera House and managed to do a piece for the Royal Ballet. And in the end, it was called Lissa, which is the goddess of rage. It was just after Sarah Everard did the murder of Sarah Everard, and I wanted to also make the women of the corps de ballet more visual in a way that is, in classical ballet, they're often seen as fairies. So I was kind of going, how do we switch that? And I worked with a rock and roll artist called Nadine Shah, who's a punchy chick. And then we made this beautiful ballet out of a 3-minute pop song. I kind of look back at it and go, how on earth did that even happen? But I think it was the fact that COVID had given me the possibility of that might never happen again. So there was this sort of impetus to be kind of brave, like I was when I was 18. Or that was a really important piece. It's not quite calculated at the time, but I think I pushed performers a lot. You don't make safe work. If you're going to make safe work, I think the audience is going to be bored. There's always an element of risk, and there's always an element of edge, and there's always an element of just pushing the physical form as far as it will go. If it's edgy for a performer, it's edgy for an audience, but then that's also exciting. I've had people sliding backwards down staircases and dancing upside down and possibly doing things that they haven't been asked to do before. They can always say no, but I'll probably push it, because if I get excited about something that I see that's illogical, I love things being physically illogical. Like, you're one step ahead of the audience. A move that shouldn't go that way, goes the other way, is kind of exciting to watch. If it just all flows and it's all safe and it's all lovely, it's a bit beige in my world, So yes, I do think I've got a lot of rage and a lot of physicality, and I think it's very visceral, the work I do. It's hard if you've been working for a while to try and be innovative or try and do something that you don't normally do. And if you can find that and find that within a group of people, then that's a really fantastic moment. I think that in-between stage, that in-between cross-genre thing is weirdly my safe place. For other people, it doesn't fit in either genre, but it's kind of where my happy place sits. It's like rock and roll meets high art, you know what I mean? That's my wheelhouse. The ideas that I have will obviously, most of the time, it's to find new artists. If I could put the Royal Ballet with the Young Fathers, I'm like, at the Roundhouse, bosh, that's great. The artists in the music industry is so exciting, but I want to make a theatre show out of it. I love watching ballet, but I don't want to always hear classical music to it. So that mix is just super interesting. If I was to try and get Arts Council funding, they would just laugh in my face because I'm too commercial. And I get that. You're always going to be put in a particular box. I think every artist has to fight that. But that's why I'm trying to naturally keep ducking and diving so that they can't say that I do one particular thing. But that will always be the hardest, to be accepted to go, I'm just going to make a pure dance piece on a reputable dance company. And they'll go, well, you've done a musical, so that's not possible. And I see it. I feel like even I'm judgmental. My own head goes, well, I'm not really going to take that as a piece of sort of pure dance because they've done a show with tap dancing in it. And it's amazing what your own brain does. Not only limit yourself, but you've got to watch your own judgment, I think a failure would be putting work out that you're not proud of or you feel slightly embarrassed by. That hasn't happened for a while, but if you're in a situation where you've produced some work that you don't feel is good enough. And then success is great. It's commercial success, fantastic, wonderful, love all of that. But then just work that you're proud of doing. I did a show at the Almeida Theatre called Spring Awakening and was able to just pour so much emotion and personal experience in that.
Mama who bore me, Mama.
It was a show that was full of yearning and validated teenage feelings, and I'd had a daughter that had had a really terrible time in COVID, and so the direct line of being able to transfer what was absolute personal experience and her truth into something that a whole audience was going to experience was kind of sort of extraordinary. People sort of toss away teenagers' feelings because they're young and they'll develop, and it's like, well, I was acutely aware of my own teenager, and we were making a show about how important these emotions are. So that direct line can be sometimes sort of just so strange and amazing. I used to do a huge amount of clubbing when I was young and go to this place called the Wag Club and would dance with these guys, and I was really into the jazz scene. There's a Radio 6 DJ called Giles Peterson, and I sort of went with him with an idea of like trying to do this whole thing for this jazz festival, and the one idea we were going to do completely changed into something else. But what did happen was that I went along to something he was doing at Dingwalls, and there was a band called Gogo Penguin who are extraordinary. For some reason, I probably had the audacity to go just call them up and ask them if they would write a ballet, of which they agreed to. Then we were like, well, where on earth are we going to put this on? And we ended up putting it on at the Barbican. There was a lot of people that went along to see a concert, and then all of a sudden we kind of invaded the space and had these beautiful dancers doing to this specifically composed piece. But it was jazz and it was all played live. But the great moment was they didn't realise they had to play the same thing twice, because in jazz they just improvise all the time. So they'd given me one track to choreograph to, and I'm quite musical, so I did it specifically to beats and points in the music. And then, of course, for the first time when we all rehearsed together, they just played something completely different, because that's what they do. We filled the Barbican, and then we took it to Latitude Festival, and it just was sort of taking things out of context, you know, taking 8 beautiful dancers and a jazz band and doing it at a festival and doing it at a Barbican and, you know, going against the grain, really. It was the Brit Awards, and we created the triptych of his album cover. But the great bit about that story was obviously Stormzy was put in the rain. He was standing in the rain and he did this extraordinary thing at the Brit Awards, but he had to get from one bit of the stage to another bit of the stage very, very quickly. And in the end, after all this sort of creativity and invention and being super cool, the one thing that was the pivotal moment as the damn socks he was wearing, because you could not have that music artist fall over between running from one stage to the other. So I spent 3 days with different pairs of socks, trying different pieces of carpet, so that this extraordinary artist who's going to win every Brit Award, whatever, is not going to fall over going from one bit of stage to the other. Early on career, when I thought I had to do everything, I would work it all out on pieces of paper, and I would work it all out on steps in my head, or I'd video myself. I would think that I'd have to give the performers everything on a plate and never leave it to chance. And then gradually, as I carried on working, there's a point where what might suddenly spontaneously happen in the room often is the best thing that happens, but it's quite a scary place to be. Beyond that, what I learnt was to collect performers that also have creative brains, because then that symbiotic process of you're trying to communicate your idea, you don't want to serve everything up on a plate, you leave things to chance, but then also you're going to have people that are going to bounce ideas backwards and forwards, and that's a fantastic place to be in. I pick the performers that I work with quite carefully. Casting's one of my favourite things, you know, and it's so surprising. And when you find performers that are just gonna, you know, you're going to be able to create work with, what a gift. I work with a director called Rupert Goold. Well, I've done quite a bit of work with him, but again, he's scary because you have to kind of create in the moment, but you'll also be pushed. And also, he is a director that really understands and admires dance in a way. So that's a and uncomfortable and challenging and probably one of the most fulfilling collaborations I've had. When there isn't an answer to anything, create art. When anything needs to be solved, create art. When there's a reason for existing in the mundane, or what can be seen as the mundane or the domestic or the day-to-day, art and creativity and music is a reason for existence, really. I can't imagine not having that escape.